Matt was building an ideal life. A career, a family, dreams of the future. But one day, everything collapsed. His wife's betrayal became a blow that exposed betrayal, pain, and thirst for revenge. This story is about how love turns into hate, and trying to punish another person can destroy yourself. I was lying on our bed, basking in an Arctic glow, when I heard the garage door open. "Shti!" I shouted, leaping to my feet. I checked the clock. 10:45. No, she couldn't be home yet. "Oh, Shti! 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 Shti!" I glanced around the bedroom. Rose petals, champagne, and wondered if everything I had worked for was about to fall apart. I'm an architect, and I've been on my own for a year now. I was working crazy hours because with only one client, it was just me. My office was in an old, abandoned gas station. I had tried setting up an office at home, but I found myself constantly taking breaks to be with Judy and our twin girls. The girls had been born 9 weeks before I graduated from the University of Texas 6 years ago. They were unexpected, but we were thrilled. We both wanted a big family, but complications during childbirth meant that Judy couldn't get pregnant again. We tried some fertility treatments, but with me starting my own business, we decided to postpone them due to the cost. Judy stayed home with the girls until I opened my office. We needed the extra income, so she began working as an executive assistant at an oil company. Her job had great hours for a working mother. Monday to Thursday, she worked from 9 to 3. But on Fridays, she had to catch a 7:10 a.m. flight to Dallas for her boss's weekly meetings. The airport was a 20-minute rush from our house, or 30 if you obeyed the speed limit. It made for long days because they wouldn't leave Dallas until 6:25, and Judy usually didn't get home until after 8:15. But about 4 months ago, things worsened. Judy's boss got promoted, and the meetings began running longer. They started booking later flights, and now the final flight didn't arrive in Midland until 9:55. Judy didn't usually get home until almost 11. I wasn't happy about it, but she never complained, so I didn't bring it up. Tonight was supposed to be a night of fun and passion, but now it looked like everything was going to fall apart. I glanced at the clock again. 10:45. She couldn't be home yet. I heard her car pulling into the garage. Why was she home now when she'd usually be arriving if the flight had been on time? But I knew the flight wasn't on time. I had checked it, which wasn't like me, just so everything would be perfectly timed for her arrival. In a daze, I looked around the room one last time. I saw the bowl of rose petals I had planned to scatter across the bed, the champagne in the ice bucket I rented, and the caramelized pecan apple pie I'd bought from Heb. It had taken an hour to bake, and I had only put it in the oven half an hour ago. I'd also gotten some vanilla ice cream to go with it. Hot apple pie with ice cream was Judy's favorite dessert, and it was one of the few things I knew how to make. For a moment, I was upset that she had ruined my surprise. This was a big day for us. I had learned that the first house I designed had won a Frank Lloyd Wright Prize. For an architect, that's like winning the Nobel Prize. I had considered announcing the award during a family dinner, but I wanted to tell Judy alone, making it the start of a romantic weekend before we began the tedious process of fertility treatments again. With the business the prize would bring, we'd be able to afford the best treatments. I hoped Judy would be thrilled. The twins were with my parents on one of their weekend RV trips. I had told them I'd have big news when we went out for dinner on Sunday night. I heard the garage door close, which was strange because Judy wasn't supposed to be home yet. A deep sense of unease crept over me. My long-held suspicions resurfaced, pulling me into a whirlwind of doubt and fear. Was I just overthinking, or was there more to her recent behavior? Her habits had changed. On Fridays, she would head straight to the hot tub, claiming it was her way to unwind after a long week. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then other changes became harder to ignore. She stopped talking about her colleagues, especially her boss, whom she had once described as inspiring. Our social life with her co-workers disappeared altogether. I couldn't remember the last time she told me she loved me or even gave me one of her signature warm hugs. Judy had always been affectionate, and now that side of her seemed to have vanished. A small, nagging voice in my head kept asking, "Why?" When she walked in and called out, "Matt, I'm home," her voice sounded cheerful, but it didn't match the turmoil in my head. Something didn't add up. I quickly checked her flight details on the computer. It confirmed what I feared. Her plane wasn't due to land for another 30 minutes. My heart sank. I confronted her, desperate for answers. Her initial reaction was confusion, but as the conversation deepened, her silence spoke louder than words. When I asked if she still loved me, her hesitance and vague responses shattered me. She admitted to feeling conflicted, but avoided giving me a direct answer. That was enough for me to know the truth. I asked her to leave, to give me space to think. She looked at me with a mix of pity and regret, apologizing repeatedly for how things had unfolded. I was numb. I didn't have the energy to process the betrayal. My mind clung to memories of how we first met, back when things were simpler and love seemed unbreakable. We had met at a soccer tournament during our college years, where I tried to impress her with my less-than-stellar skills. Despite my antics, she saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. From that day, we were inseparable, sharing dreams, laughter, and the kind of love I thought would last forever. Now, sitting in the aftermath of her departure, I found myself overwhelmed by a void I couldn't fill. My emotions ranged from disbelief to anger, but mostly I felt hollow. The life we had built together was crumbling, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, I realized that I needed to rebuild, not for her, but for myself. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way forward. With a soft smile, Judy sat beside me, her eyes filled with trust. "I love you," I told her, meaning every word. It was a special moment, one we had both anticipated for a long time, though I felt unprepared for how overwhelming it would be. Despite the nerves and the awkwardness that come with first experiences, Judy's understanding nature made everything feel okay. "Don't worry," she reassured me with a gentle laugh when things didn't go as planned. "We've got a lifetime to figure it all out." I smiled at her, grateful for her kindness and patience. "I'll do better next time," I promised, and she squeezed my hand, her expression one of absolute faith in us. Over the weekend, we grew closer, not just as a couple, but as partners learning how to be vulnerable with one another. By the time we left, I felt we had reached a new level of understanding and connection. Judy's laughter, her encouragement, and the way she met each moment with optimism reminded me of how lucky I was. We were married during the following Christmas holidays, and our lives together were filled with love, laughter, and shared memories. Living in Round Rock, we built a life we were both proud of. I worked hard to make her happy, and she brought joy into everything we did. Even years later, thinking back to those early days brought a smile to my face. I'd planted a piece of sod from the spot where I first saw her in Georgetown, right in the middle of our front yard. It was a reminder of where it all began. As I stood in the kitchen, fixing myself a cup of tea, I tried to summon the emotions I used to feel so easily. Happiness, excitement, even sadness. They were just out of reach. It wasn't that I didn't care. I think part of me wasn't ready to face the full weight of those feelings yet. But I knew one thing for sure. Judy had been my world, and every decision I made now would honor the love we shared. I knew our marriage was over the moment I found out she was cheating. As I wrecked the bedroom last night, I was consumed with the desire to hurt her, to make her feel pain. This morning I was shocked to discover that I had destroyed everything in her closet. I had shredded all her underwear and torn apart everything else. I didn't even realize I had grabbed my fish fillet knife from the tackle box until I saw it lying near the bed. That realization brought back disturbing memories of a childhood friend, and it scared me. Trying to avoid recalling that horrifying memory, I began to think about what I knew of Judy's affair. First, she had mentioned considering marriage to the other man. I wondered why that thought didn't hurt me the way it should have. The mere thought of Judy in his arms, fully clothed, made me recoil. But the idea of her marrying him didn't bother me at all. I continued to explore this thought with strange detachment. Deep down, I could feel that Judy still loved me. I was sure that if I pushed hard enough, I could win her back. I knew her well enough to know how to manipulate her, and I also had the advantage of the twins and her own sense of guilt. I was aware of how guilty she must have felt, and to be honest, Judy was easily influenced. Then I thought about the man she was involved with. I knew quite a bit about her boss, James Capote. In his late 40s, he had been divorced for over 5 years and had 2 kids, a son about to graduate high school and a daughter a couple of years behind him. Judy had told me he was always trying to get more time with them, but he only had them every other weekend and alternating holidays. He didn't even get them for the summer. I had met him several times when Judy first started working, but I hadn't seen him in the past few months. From the start, I didn't like him. He had a wandering eye, and although I could understand why he might pursue Judy, I couldn't believe she could have fallen for him. That line of thinking tempted me to spiral into a what-if scenario or start blaming myself, but I pushed those thoughts away. Instead, I went to my computer and started researching divorce laws in Texas. I found that a divorce could be finalized in as little as 60 days after filing, with the decree read in court. If uncontested, neither party even had to be present. The sooner this was over, the better, I thought. I found forms online for a fee, and I didn't hesitate to pay. I spent hours planning what I wanted in a settlement and how I could get Judy to agree to my terms. I finally decided that my primary concern was what was best for our girls. I briefly considered canceling our credit cards and emptying the bank accounts, but decided that, as much as I hated Judy at that moment, I didn't think she would try to take anything from me or our children. I wanted the house so the girls wouldn't have to move. We had borrowed every penny of equity to help start my business, which had only yielded around $10,000. With the house, I would be able to borrow enough to buy Judy out. I knew that once I received the prize, my business would be worth a fortune. I didn't want her or that jerk Capote to have any claim to it. That was another reason I wanted everything settled quickly. The prize wouldn't be publicly announced until a banquet in 3 months. But I had been tipped off. Normally I wouldn't have even attended, but since I was going to win, I knew I could get a ticket. Yes, getting this done quickly was crucial, but that meant I would have to offer a fair division if I wanted it done without delay. I was torn between wanting to erase every trace of our life together and making as few changes as possible for the girls. In the end, I decided to hire an appraiser to evaluate everything, including the things I'd destroyed. I would offer to replace the items in addition to her share of our property. We would alternate choosing what we wanted until one of us had half of the total value. By evening, I had formulated a plan that I thought Judy would accept. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. Then I realized I hadn't eaten all day, and the thought of food made me sick to my stomach. Still, if I wanted to execute my plan, I needed strength. Not trusting my own cooking, I decided to order pizza, something fitting for the day of tearing apart our life together. As I ate, my mind kept returning to thoughts of how I could make Judy feel the pain I was experiencing. I knew that once I got past the denial, the emotional pain would be unbearable. But how could I make her feel the same way? Her leaving me wouldn't hurt her the way it hurt me. Sure, she might have regrets, but she was leaving me for someone else. I'd be the one left alone. There was nothing I could do to break her heart. Still, despite my denial and the unacceptability of her actions, I didn't think I could stop loving her. After much internal debate and rationalizing, I realized that it wasn't my decision whether she stayed or left. She made that decision when she allowed Capote into her life. I couldn't live with having a wife who did that, end of story. If the choice wasn't mine, then what was the worst I could hope for? Then it came to me, a perfect solution, but I still had to ask myself if I could make it work. Judy had always deferred to my wishes. It used to drive me crazy how I could never get her to decide things like where we'd go for dinner. She might pout later about my choice, but she refused to ever give me her opinion unless I made an issue out of it. Could I use that to push her into what I wanted her to do? Ultimately, it would still be her choice. But I knew I had a good chance. I knew her, maybe not as well as I should have, but I knew the kinds of pressures she responded to, and I knew I could apply a lot of pressure. Late into the night, I plotted and planned. It would take a delicate approach. Judy called a little after 8. I took several deep breaths before answering. Judy, you've made your choice. Even if you didn't mean to, you've made a choice for both of us. The question now is how this is going to affect the girls. You know, divorce is always hard on kids, especially ones their age. So, do you want a war, or are we going to make this as easy as possible on them? Matt, please let me talk. I'm sorry I hurt you. I love you. I don't want you to hate me. I never expected for it to get this far, but I almost lost control when I heard the word love. Judy, every time I hear your voice, it just makes me hate you and what you've done more. Do you realize what this mess is going to do to the twins? We're trying to raise them with values and morals. How do we explain that you threw away the most sacred vows for a fling? Judy was sobbing. It wasn't like that. Oh, really? After all these months, you still haven't decided to marry him. How's that going to sound to the girls? I paused, letting the silence hang. Then I continued. I've already spoken to my folks and told them to plan on keeping the girls a little later. If you agree, I'll have them brought here at 5, and we can tell them together. If not, I'll tell them alone. I'll be civil while we talk to the girls, but that's the last time I ever want to hear your voice until we're divorced. I'm doing my best to keep my anger in check. You'll always be the mother of my children, and we'll have to talk about them. Just don't push me right now. Matt, I really didn't mean to hurt you. Yeah, I know, it just happened that way. Let's get this over with as quickly as possible. I'll pay for an apartment for you, but I hope you're not planning to live with that jerk unless you get married. That would really mess the kids up. I paused, letting my heart rate slow. I want to keep as much of this mess from them as possible. It's up to you. You're the one calling the shots. Could I come over right now and talk? No. Please, Matt, I don't want it to be this way. I cut her off, speaking firmly. Our marriage ended the second you slept with him. I sighed dramatically. Whatever your reasons, you ended it. Let's just bury it decently. I paused, then said softly, "I really hope you marry him. Not just for the girls, but I think it'll make it easier on me too. I don't want to believe you ended our marriage just for some hot intimacy." I let the silence build. Finally, Judy slumped and said, "Okay, Matt, if that's what you want, I'll do it your way." If there's a place of deep despair, I've been there. The numbness stayed with me, or I think I would have broken under the weight of my daughter's expressions when Judy began, "You need to understand that your daddy and I love you very much, but sometimes adults make mistakes." She spoke for several minutes, using words that the girls struggled to comprehend. Finally, I interjected as calmly as I could. "Your mommy has decided to marry someone else. We've agreed to this, and it means we'll need to live apart." The moment those words left my mouth, I felt a wave of regret. A memory of a poem by Omar Khayyam from high school surfaced in my mind. The moving finger writes, "And having writ, moves on, nor all your piety nor wit shall lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it." The truth in those words hit me hard. My world revolved around those two precious faces. I could barely register their tears, only the anguish on their little faces. It felt like a shadow from my past resurfacing, a childhood memory of a friend's family torn apart by tragedy. That thought, however fleeting, reminded me of how deeply words and actions can shape young lives. I know Judy and I said more things to the girls, answers to their questions, but I was so consumed by my emotions that I only remember holding them close. Eventually, one of the girls asked, "But Mommy, why don't you love Daddy anymore?" That question brought me back to the moment. I saw the strain in Judy's face as she tried to console them. Her voice was full of emotion as she said, "Mommy will always care about Daddy, but sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions." I gently added, "You won't fully understand this until you're older, but Mommy has chosen to be with someone else. That doesn't mean she doesn't care about us. It just means that things will be a little different. But you will always have all of our love." Carrie, the more expressive of the twins, ran to her mother, her little fists pounding against her in frustration. Lori followed but stopped to grab a toy from the coffee table. She waved it for a moment before I intervened, gently pulling them both back into my arms. I spoke in a steady voice. "I know this is hard for everyone, but we'll figure this out together." Judy left the room for a moment and returned with a calmer demeanor. Her voice was steady as she said, "I'll be staying with a friend for now, but I will always be here for you." I reassured the girls as they clung to me. "Things might feel strange for a little while, but we'll make sure you're always surrounded by love. That will never change." I took a deep breath and said, "I've got a packet with some legal documents I've prepared. I'd like you to take them with you. This is my plan for how to divide our property and settle everything. Sorry, poor choice of words. I'll agree to pretty much anything you want, except for the custody of the girl and you using my name. I'll give in on that if you marry Capote once this is final. It will help shield the truth from the girls, but either way, I want this to be over in the shortest time possible, which is 60 days from Monday. I kind of lost it a minute ago, but if you agree, we can meet with our lawyer tomorrow and finalize things. I'm sure your boss will let you take the day off, and I want the papers filed by tomorrow night. If we manage that, I promise I'll do everything I can to support your relationship with the girls. I'll never tell them, the captain, or anyone else that you're a lying, cheating woman who destroyed our happy home." Judy looked like she was about to say something, but finally her tears began to fall. Without a word, she turned and quietly walked out the door. After getting the girls to bed, I settled into my chair. I buried my head in my hands and whispered, "The captain, oh no, this is going to destroy him. I'm so sorry this had to happen to him. He doesn't deserve this." Judy's father had retired as an admiral, though he never served in that rank and refused to use the title. His last command had been aboard one of the super aircraft carriers. A botched landing when he was in the back seat with a pilot new to the ship had left him paralyzed from the waist down. Even though I never saw him as disabled, he lived in a wheelchair and had to use a tube to urinate. Judy, a very late first child, had been born just before his accident. Judy's mother had passed away from K-Sear when Judy was still in junior high, and the captain raised her on his own. I've never met a finer man. He was like a father to me, more than my own. No, that's not quite fair. My father was a good dad, but he spent his life as a petroleum engineer and geologist. He was away more than he was home, and while he did his best, we were never close. It was different with the captain. I always said I could never leave Judy unless the captain left her too. He was the first man I truly admired, who also treated me like a man rather than a kid. Judy and I still had almost a year and a half of school left when we got married. Even I knew I was a bit immature for marriage, but the captain brought out the best in me. Trapped in a wheelchair, he was still the most intimidating man I'd ever met. And I could go on for days about how I felt about him and the impact he had on my life. I took a deep breath, glanced at the clock, and for a moment tried to convince myself it was too late to call him. He picked up on the second ring. "Son, first let me say I'm on your side. She's my daughter and I love her, but I can't believe she did something so foolish. I know she's confused, but..." We talked for a long while. He shared stories from the Navy about wives cheating when their husbands were deployed for 6 months or a year. He never outright said that some of those couples lived happily ever after, but I could tell where he was heading. Despite wanting to interrupt, I respected him too much to cut him off. Eventually, he got to his point. "I've read your paperwork. Is there any chance that if I beat the hell out of this woman, you'd consider giving her another chance?" I couldn't help but smile at the captain's exaggeration. He and I had often discussed the problem with trying to discipline our girls. We both believed that a mild spa king of a young child was more effective than trying to reason with an immature brain, but neither of us was particularly good at it. A chill ran through me, and I worried I might be having heart issues. "No, sir, Captain, I'm sorry, but this wasn't a one-time mistake. I never understood how a man could kill his wife, but I do now. I'll spend my life working on forgiving her, but even if I could, I still couldn't live with her." I sighed, not wanting to say those words, especially not to him, but I couldn't lie to the captain. "Besides, sir, even if I could, we talked and she loves him. I couldn't live with that, not even for the girls." His voice softened. "Son, she's really messed up right now. If you give it time." She said they were talking marriage. I didn't even know what was happening, and they were already talking marriage. I know I was working long hours, but I just can't excuse this. I want her to marry the bastard, the guy, and we'll both live with it. I've said I won't complain about her. Captain, our marriage is over, but I do think it's best if the twins don't grow up thinking their mother tossed aside our marriage for the thrill of a fling." There was a long pause. She hadn't told me that. Son, are you sure this is what you want to do? You want to push her into this marriage?" I made my voice as firm as possible. "Judy and I will always be connected through the twins. Right now I have absolutely no respect for her. If she marries him, at least she's trying to do the right thing. Who knows? Maybe a few years from now we can both look at this differently." The captain interrupted. If she marries him, it's going to be bad, and it'll make things really tough on our relationship, yours and mine. You'll always be the girl's granddad, and I'll always be their father. I'll let you decide how much more you're comfortable with, but I'll never be the one to step back from what you and I have. I heard the captain sigh. Then he said, This is tough, but we'll go with your way. She's made her bed. I guess we'll see how much she likes it, but you know how I feel about you, and I don't think two wrongs make a right. I've heard the phrase hard heart more times than I can count. Through the conversation, I could feel mine changing. I didn't exactly hear a voice in my head, but I knew I was crossing a line, turning my heart into something unbreakable. I know, sir, but I don't have a choice. I couldn't take her back now and look at myself in the mirror. As much as I loved Judy, I won't be a weak husband. Even if I were willing, what kind of example would that set for my girls? Judy severed our bond. The sooner we make it legal, the sooner we can move past this and the future can figure itself out. If I hadn't known the captain, I might have thought I heard tears in his voice. Son, I'll encourage her to take your offer to settle this tomorrow. Just promise me we can keep talking, that you won't shut me out no matter how bad it gets. Please, promise me that. His voice cracked. My voice was rough when I responded, You have my word, sir. A long, heavy silence followed, and I heard the captain say something that might have been a goodbye. I couldn't trust my voice enough to say even that. I knew his pain was greater than mine. He loved us both. I hung up the phone, and though I tried, no tears came. I didn't like myself very much, and I hated Judy for making me feel this way. 3 months later, I sat alone at a table near the back of the massive auditorium. As I walked up to accept my award, they announced that I was the youngest person ever to receive it. At 28, I was 7 years younger than the previous youngest recipient. I stood up, gave an acceptance speech, and tried to hide the bitterness I felt. Still, I couldn't help but remember the days that followed when I found out I had won. The captain had come to the lawyer's office that Monday morning, and whenever Judy hesitated over any term, he pressured her into a compromise. We finished before noon, and the papers were filed before the courthouse closed. 61 days later, the judge read the decree in open court, and we were divorced. A week later, Judy became Mrs. James Capote. It hurt, and the girls cried for the entire week of their honeymoon. As I flew home, I realized for the first time just how much I had lost. I was the most sought-after architect in the world. Clients were clamoring to hire me. Yet here I was, alone on a plane. I had my girls, my parents, but I had slain the mastodon, and there was no one to share the victory with. When I got home, my office was flooded with calls from potential clients. The only call I answered was from the captain. He said all the right things to make me feel good, to tell me how proud he was of me. Then, in a softer tone, he asked, "When did you find out about it?" When I told him, he cursed like only an ex-Navy man could. Once he calmed down, he said, "That sucks. That really sucks." Then, in a quieter voice, he added, "I know what it's like to have life kick you in the gut. Words can't help, but I'm here for you." After a long pause, he said, "Son, I can't fix this, but if you want to go out and blow off some steam, I'll either watch the girls or join you and put it on my tab." "Thanks, Captain. If you can avoid talking about her, I can't think of anyone I'd rather be out with tonight." I did go out with the captain, but I think that was the most desolate week of my life. 2 years after the divorce, I found myself in New York again, celebrating a professional achievement. This year, my collection of Frank Lloyd Wright prizes grew to 4. I had won one for a house last year, and this year I made history with an unprecedented 3-peat by winning another for a home. My 4th prize was for a commercial building I had designed for Midland, which sent the architecture world into a frenzy. I was also the first person ever to win in 2 different categories in the same year. So why was I sitting at a table, surrounded by strangers, with no friends? Why did I feel more alone than I ever had in my life? Why was I lonely? It wasn't because people weren't reaching out. In fact, I had to get an unlisted home number because potential clients from all over the world would call me at all hours. I was away more than I intended, but when I was home, I was truly home. I had built an office addition to my house and only went to my downtown office when absolutely necessary. I never worked while my girls were out of school, except for the month Judy had them. Our summers were filled with long tours, mostly to visit potential construction sites. But the girls loved seeing where my next design might be built. Plus, we spent a lot of time exploring the area. I always wanted my designs to blend seamlessly with their surroundings. Why was I lonely? It wasn't due to a lack of attention from women. While I hadn't dated much, I received calls from women around the world asking if I could meet them. It seemed that the story of my broken heart during what should have been my greatest triumph had made headlines, and women everywhere with big hearts were eager to help me heal. The fact that I was making money faster than the mint could print it probably didn't hurt either. Unfortunately, I couldn't stand myself, not even a little bit. How could I like, let alone fall in love with someone else until I liked myself? I hadn't been celibate. I could have all the intimacy I wanted, but I hadn't found anyone I felt I could truly connect with. I couldn't move past my issues. I just couldn't respect a woman who would want someone like me. Instead of blaming myself, I tried to blame it on trust. I told myself that I couldn't trust anyone, and until I did, I wouldn't bring anyone home who the twins could get attached to. Honestly, divorce sucks. As an adult, it wasn't much fun, but as a parent, it was heartbreaking to see what it was doing to my beautiful girls. They never spoke of their mother, but they often let slip comments about their stepfather and his children. They never mentioned the shouting matches with their step-siblings, but I knew it had to be difficult for them. I tortured myself, wondering just how hostile that household might be for them. I had just returned on a red-eye flight from New York and was trying to recover in my easy chair when the phone rang. The captain didn't waste any time. "Son, that son of a beach has put her in the hospital this time. He started beating her right after you got him fired, and now he's put her in the hospital. You've got to get her out of there before he kills her. Even if you won't do it for Judy, think about the twins. They shouldn't see their mother being used as a punching bag." A wave of panic hit me. Where are the girls? Relax, they're fine. They were spending the night at Laura's place, and I called your parents to pick them up. They left right away for one of their trips. They'll bring the girls to you Sunday evening. I exhaled in relief. Why don't you come over and we'll talk about it? This is the first I'm hearing of him beating her. Why would she let that happen? You know why. Don't play dumb. We did everything we could to push her into that marriage. If she didn't know back then that you were out to give her a taste of her own medicine, she figured it out soon enough. She feels so guilty about what she did. She'd accept anything, even his beatings. I gritted my teeth. I could deceive myself, but not the captain. I didn't think it would go this far. You knew he was a bastard. What did you think he'd do when he found out you were behind his firing and the intimacy harassment charges? I swallowed hard. I guess because I'd never think of hitting a woman, I assumed he wouldn't either. "Come on over, Captain, and we'll figure this out, I promise." There was a long silence, and then the captain's voice became resolute. "This has to stop. No one can treat my baby like that. Judy made me promise not to do anything rash the last time. I may be stuck in this chair, but this has to end. Sure, Captain, I am sorry. For your sake, I never thought it would come to this. I'll be there in about an hour and a half. I'm stopping by the hospital to try to talk to Judy. Damn him, God damn him to hell." He slammed the phone down, and a chill ran through me. That wasn't just a curse, it was heartfelt. The captain, in his 60s and not in the best health, had never been a man to stand by when an innocent was under attack. As I waited, I thought about my plans for revenge. When the divorce was final, I spent days, weeks, trying to come up with a way to get back at Capote. But nothing seemed worth it if it would hurt me more than it would hurt him. I was in decent shape, but even though he was nearly 20 years older than me, he was still close to his playing weight from his days as a linebacker at Tech. I might land a sucker punch, but even if he didn't press charges, I didn't think I could win in a fight unless I spent years training in something like karate. And who had time for that? I checked Texas laws, and I couldn't file an alienation of affection claim. Judy might have a case for intimacy harassment, but I didn't. For more than a year and a half, the lack of revenge gnawed at me like an embedded splinter. Then fate stepped in. The CEO of Capote's company, coincidentally, ran into me at a charity event. The event was in Midland, and the man lived in New York City. Somehow he had advance word of my recent FLW Public Building Award and wanted me to design a large office building for them in Midland. I arranged a meeting, showed him a computer-generated design I had worked on for years. Then I told him the truth. If it were any other company, I'd jump at the chance to build the dream project I'd had since I was a kid, but no amount of money would make me work for his company. Of course, a company of that size had never heard of Capote, let alone my ex-wife. When I insisted that I wouldn't work for a company that allowed such behavior, he didn't take it well. A few weeks later, Capote was fired for intimacy harassment. The CEO called to thank me. He explained that Capote had been accused of harassment multiple times over his 15 years with the company. After reinvestigating 2 recent cases, they found enough evidence to fire him. We signed a contract a week later. Professionally, I was on top of the world, but with the captain's call, I feared my personal life was about to hit rock bottom. When the captain arrived, over an hour late, he wheeled into the house without offering an explanation. Without waiting for a drink or anything, he jumped right in. "Jesus, son, she's a mess. She'll be in the hospital for at least a week. Hell, they only kept me for 3 days when I had an intimacy bypass." He was shaking, and I couldn't help but notice that it stopped right at the point where he was paralyzed. It added to the gravity of the moment. He was quiet for about 90 seconds, still trying to regain control when he spoke again. "I can't let this happen. I supported everything you did to her because I thought she deserved it. But this? She doesn't deserve this, and you've got to put a stop to it." "How can I stop it, Captain?" "She's not my wife anymore. I don't have any power. She could divorce him or press charges if she wanted to." The captain's voice crackled with a commanding authority I had never witnessed before. In that moment, I realized how one of his junior officers must have felt when they messed up on his ship. "Don't try to pull that crap on me. I was there, I helped you. Damn it, you knew exactly what you were doing and you went ahead with it. You wanted her to feel what it's like to have someone you love betray you. And you made sure she would. I love you, but you're as cold-hearted a bastard as I've ever met." You would have made an excellent fighter-bomber pilot. You strike with a plan, but no emotion. You knew exactly what you wanted to do to Judy, and you did it. But for God's sake, tell me you didn't mean for this to happen." I almost immediately denied it, but the look in his eyes froze my words. I lowered my head. "Yeah, Captain, I knew what I was doing. I knew any man who cheated like he did wouldn't stop. Once a cheater, always a cheater." I met his gaze. They weren't cold or angry as I had expected, but instead held a trace of what I thought might be compassion. I swallowed hard and continued. "I didn't think she'd stay with him. Midland's a small town, and I made sure she knew he was cheating. I thought she'd divorce him." He interrupted. "Were you going to take her back?" "No, Captain, I loved Judy, but I couldn't live with someone who didn't love me or who chose someone else. Maybe I could have forgiven her for cheating, but not for falling in love with someone else. I know I pushed all her buttons to get her to marry him. I used the girls. I thought I was using you, and I used her own morals to pressure her into a marriage I was sure wouldn't last 6 months. I wanted to hurt her, but—" I stopped, wanting to say I didn't want her hurt like this, but I wasn't sure I meant it. I was sorry for the captain's sake, but damn it, she had made her bed, and I was more than content that it was filled with nails. The captain locked eyes with me. I tried to get her to leave him when I saw her at the hospital, but she wouldn't listen. "The only man who can make her leave is you. You sentenced her to this. You're the only one who can change it. Isn't it about time you showed her a little mercy?" The captain paused for a moment. "Honestly, this didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I hoped that after she learned her lesson, repented, and crawled back to you on her hands and knees, you'd take her back. I've never seen anyone as devoted to her as you were. I still think if she leaves him, you'll take her back. But I don't understand why you think she stopped loving you. I asked her that night, and she said, 'I did love you.' Not, 'I do love you.' She used the past tense, and that's when I knew there was no hope." It was a weak response to his question, but it was the best I could do. The captain exploded. "That's it? That's all you had, the tense of one word?" He regained control, giving me a hard look. No, you knew better than that. It's about damn time you understood what this has done to her." He had been shouting, but stopped. After a few seconds, he seemed to collect himself. He made a sharp turn and headed for my front door. "Wait right here. I need to get something from the car." He did another turn, faced me, and using that authoritative tone I hadn't heard before, he ordered, "No." "You do it." On the passenger seat of my car, you'll find a brown paper sack with some books. Bring them here. I don't usually respond well to orders like that, but I grabbed the sack. When I offered it to him, he told me to put it on my table. "Did you know Judy kept a journal?" When I shook my head, he continued, "Well, I didn't know either, but she did. When I saw her at the hospital, I yelled at her about getting a divorce, but she wouldn't listen. When I calmed down, I asked her what excuse he gave for the beating, and she said he'd just bought a new journal and saw it. He demanded she hand over her old journals, but she refused. It was obvious she was terrified of what he'd do if he found them. When I offered to take them for safekeeping, she jumped at the chance. She made me promise not to read them before she told me where they were hidden. I also promised I wouldn't let the guy I brought with me read them. He glanced at his chair. I couldn't reach her hiding place. She had them hidden in the attic under some insulation, so I took a friend. I had her write me a note giving me permission to retrieve them. I picked up a cop, a friend's son, and we went over there. He was in uniform, and Capote didn't give us any trouble. The place was a disaster. Kyle climbed into the attic, and when he came down, I took the most recent journal. She had cut the center out of a cookbook. Capote glared at us the whole time, but that was all the gutless coward did. I haven't read them, and I'm certain Kyle didn't either. I didn't promise not to give them to you, and you didn't promise not to read them. He paused and looked at me with an intense gaze. Listen, son, I couldn't love you more if you were my own flesh and blood. Judy has her flaws, but she's not a liar. He paused again, and seeing the thoughts cross my face, he continued, Not telling you about her affair is a kind of lie, but we both know that if you had asked her directly, she would have been honest with you. Still, what's in those journals is her speaking to herself. It's the raw, unfiltered truth. You know that. I want you to read them. Try to understand why she did what she did. We both know it wasn't because she fell in love with that jerk. He rubbed his chin, taking another pause. I can't force you to forgive her, but there's a saying, to understand all is to forgive all. Maybe if you understand more, well, if you can't forgive, maybe at least have mercy on her. Please. The captain left, and I sat there staring at the pile of journals, though my mind wasn't focused on them. I kept thinking about his last words. He mentioned mercy twice, and said I had Judy at my mercy. The idea didn't sit well with me, and I wasn't sure I fully understood what that meant. I went to my computer, opened the American Heritage Dictionary, and looked up mercy. It listed 4 meanings, starting with the most common. 1. Compassionate treatment, especially of those under one's power. Clemency. 2. A disposition to be kind and forgiving, a heart full of mercy. 3. Something to be thankful for, a blessing. It was a mercy that no one was hurt. 4. Alleviation of distress, relief. Distributing food to the homeless was an act of mercy. I angrily closed the dictionary and tried to justify my actions toward Judy. I just gave her what she wanted, helped her make the moral choice to marry the man. But I couldn't even finish that thought. Yes, it was her choice, and she was responsible, but I pushed her, and I knew I had power over her. Even in the divorce process, I could tell she wanted to do anything she could to make up for the pain she caused me, and I had taken full advantage of that. I certainly wasn't in a mood to be kind or forgiving. I thought about that. It was true, but who did I really want to punish? Judy or Capote? I had ruined his career. No one would hire a man with a 15-year gap in his resume. And if he listed his last job, any background check would show he'd been fired for repeated intimacy harassment that led to legal settlements. Who would take that risk? Now he worked at a convenience store, lucky to have that, a far cry from his 6-figure salary. But I realized the book still didn't feel balanced. I actually wanted him dead in a robbery. In a flash of insight, I realized that in my mind, the books would never balance as long as he had Judy. I might not want her back, but he definitely didn't deserve her, especially after he started hitting her. I didn't think the 3rd definition of mercy applied, but what about the 4th? Was I inclined to alleviate Judy's pain? I didn't think so, but that realization didn't make me feel good about myself. In fact, it made me feel ashamed. I tried to recall anything I could about mercy and remembered the phrase, "The quality of mercy be not strained." I had no idea what it meant or where it came from, so I Googled it. Here's what I found. Origin. From Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. Portia. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. It is an attribute to God himself. And earthly power doth then show likest God's when mercy seasons justice. It didn't exactly make me feel any better. I was still exhausted. It was just after noon, but according to my body clock, it felt like the middle of the night. The air was hot inside, but boiling outside, as you'd expect in Midland in late July. I went to my room, threw myself on the bed, and drifted off to sleep, not caring much about the dreams that came. When I woke up, it was 4:30 a.m. I found myself muttering the phrase, "To understand all is to forgive all." In the deep darkness of the early morning, I wondered if that cliché held any truth. If I understood, would I forgive? What would that forgiveness even look like? I had sworn I wouldn't look at her journals, but now I felt compelled to find answers. At first, I only intended to read what she might have written about the affair. The problem was, she rarely included the year and almost never the month. Instead, she referred to the day of the week. It quickly became clear she wasn't writing for anyone else to read, nor was she writing even for herself to read. This was her way of making sense of the events in her life. Once I started reading, I couldn't stop. This was the essence of the woman I loved more deeply than I ever thought possible. I may have hated what she'd done. I did hate it. But this was the soul of the woman I would have fought 100 dragons to protect. I grabbed a book, opened it, and began reading. It's over. The cavalry didn't come charging over the hill. The good guys didn't show up just in time. Matt didn't stop the wedding. As I stood there at the altar, my daughters in their little bridesmaid dresses, the words, "Is there anyone here who has a reason?" hung in the air, and Matt didn't burst into the church to save me. I said the words, and this time, I won't take them back. What a ridiculous fantasy. I didn't even realize I had been hoping to be rescued until today, so why would anyone else? Now I'm truly trapped, in every way possible. I think it started to sink in around dawn. James barely acknowledged me after the ceremony, spending more time on his hobbies than on our marriage. It hurt, but I told myself I had to endure it. Now James is out playing golf. What kind of man plays golf alone on his honeymoon? The kind of man who insists on control and wants everything his way. I swear I'll never lose myself like this again. Oh, Matt, why did you let me go? But deep down I know why, don't I? I saw your face that Friday night, and a big part of me died. Still, I kept hoping, praying that you'd change your mind about this marriage I'm now stuck in. Would it have made a difference if I could have explained everything to you? But how could I explain something I don't understand myself? How could I have resisted all the subtle pressures to keep someone else happy while silencing my own voice? Why did I work so hard to hide what was happening from Matt? He would have stood by me. He would have helped me. But then, for the past month, I wasn't sure I even knew what I wanted. Did I convince myself I could make this marriage work? Or was I just lying to survive? Well, whatever hope I had, James has managed to destroy it. Constantly bragging about how he won me, treating me like a possession rather than a partner. I feel like a trophy wife at 28. His way of holding on to youth as he faces 50. Oh God, what have I done? Who can save me now? As I kept reading the journal, certain things slowly became clear. First, Judy had a tendency to yield to those she saw as powerful, and James exploited that. Second, I hadn't realized how deeply the struggles in our relationship had affected her. She felt crushed and resentful, and I hadn't fully understood how much it mattered to her. That doesn't excuse her choices. Her journal made it clear that she knew the risks she was taking, She was deeply regretful, often writing about her feelings of guilt and self-doubt. Then I came across the part where her story took a darker turn. It broke my heart to see the stark, simple words she used to describe how she had been treated. She never made a big deal about it, accepting the pain as the just consequence of her choices. But what really broke her was the emotional toll of everything she endured. When I finished reading the last journal entry, I was drained. I went back to bed and slept. One of the perks of owning my design company was being free to keep my own hours. No one called for the next 2 days, and I spent that time brooding. James Capote was a problem that could wait. What couldn't wait was Judy. She would be out of the hospital in a few days, and while I didn't know what I wanted from or for her, I knew I didn't want her going back to their house. Even if I didn't care for her, the thought of the twins being in the same house as Capote terrified me. At least that's what I told myself. But every time I thought about taking action, memories of the good moments with Judy would resurface. It was hard to think clearly with so much unresolved. On the third morning, I set out for the hospital, still determined, but uncertain about what I was determined to do. When I entered her room, she was still asleep. I stood by her bed and looked at her face. It was covered with awful bruises, now fading into a sickly shade of green and brown. I'd never seen anyone so badly hurt. As I leaned over her to check the other side of her face, I didn't even realize I was crying. I'll never know if it was my tear that fell on her or my muffled sobs that woke her. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, she smiled at me. But as she became aware of her surroundings, she let out a small gasp and pulled the sheet over her head. "Judy, we need to talk. I've read your journals and I understand so much more now. We can't hide from this anymore." She made a sound that was half laugh, half snort, but lowered the sheet. Though she was smiling, her eyes didn't reflect it. "I know. I never wanted to keep anything from you. If you had asked, I would have given them to you. I don't remember everything I wrote, but I hope you'll forgive me someday." I gave her a small smile. "What matters now is that you don't go back to him. Ever. That's final." She tilted her head, giving me the look a teacher might give a slow student. "That's not an option. I married him for better or worse. There's just been a lot more worse than I planned for." I felt my anger rising. "Judy, that's not an option. Just pretend I'm riding in on a white horse, here to rescue you. You are not going back." She blinked several times, uncertainty in her eyes. "What will I do? Where will I go?" "I'll help you. I'll make sure he can't hurt you. I'll have my lawyer draw up divorce papers and restraining orders. If I bring them to you this afternoon, will you sign them?" Without looking up, Judy nodded into my chest. That afternoon, my lawyer and 2 of his secretaries came to Judy's room. Once everything was finalized, Judy turned to me and asked, "When this is all over, will you take me back?" I paused, recalling a lesson I'd learned about mercy. This was the moment to offer it, to hold on to what made us human. I didn't know what the future held, but for now I simply held her hand and said, "Let's take it one step at a time." 5 years later, I found myself sitting in the waiting room on the maternity floor. Judy was being transferred from her labor room to the delivery room, expecting another set of twins, this time boys. I sat beside a nervous first-time father, and we chatted when the nurse came in to announce that Judy was ready. Mark stood, shook my hand, and said, "I really appreciate you coming. It's going to be a tough few months, isn't it?" I smiled. "Yes, and the girls are going wild. I'll try to keep them at my place as much as I can, but I'll have my hands full too." He nodded nervously, before heading off to join Judy for the birth. Mark's a good man. He's a major in the Army Reserves and a captain with the Midland Fire Department. He earned, not one, a Silver Star in Afghanistan and a second Purple Heart in Iraq. I respect him. He was a great match for Judy, and I was happy they had found each other. As for me, how had I answered the question Judy had asked me 5 years ago? I had tried to let my mercy show. No, Judy, I won't. Her face fell, and the tears started again. When she finally composed herself, she managed to look me in the eye and asked, "Why?" I wanted to reply, "Because I want a wife I can admire from a distance, not one I need to control to keep her loyal." But I didn't. Shakespeare's gentle rain from heaven softened my harsh words. All right, I did say it, but I tried to phrase it more gently. I said, "I understand us better now than I did when we were married. We're just not right for each other. That doesn't make either of us a bad person, but you need someone who can guide you, and that's not me. I'm too focused on myself. I'll always have a special place in my heart for the woman who gave me the twins. Actually, that's not true either. You'll always be my first love, but we just don't fit. We've both made mistakes, but as friends, maybe we can help each other make better choices." Mark was right for Judy. He didn't keep her on a leash, but more like the secure tether used by mountain climbers. They were good for each other, and Judy, anchored by that security, thrived in ways she never did when we were married. Mark and Judy lived in the same school district as me. The twins could bike back and forth between our houses. We didn't hang out together, but we were supportive. If we disagreed, we'd go to the captain for mediation, and the girls never knew we had argued. The twins jokingly complained about having too many parents, but despite the complaints, they loved Mark, and he loved them. They were thrilled to have new brothers. A lot of new brothers. I wasn't at the hospital to support Mark or Judy. We weren't that close. It was one of those odd twists of fate. I was there for my wife and our new twin boys, born the day before. Happily ever after? Maybe. Mercy doesn't mean avoiding consequences, just reducing them. I didn't have to punish Judy as much as I could have. Taking her back wouldn't have been mercy, it would have been something else. I met my wife through one of Judy's friends, and we were everyone's ideal couple. I kept her on a pedestal, and she kept my oversized ego in check. She loves my girls, and they love her. If Judy hadn't cheated, we would still be married. It would have been better for the twins, but not for me. Maybe we married too young. Maybe we saw each other as acceptable partners and didn't wait for perfection. Perhaps we hadn't grown up enough, and both of us changed as we did. What I do know is that I was never as happy with Judy as I am with my wife. Showing mercy to Capote was harder. It was close, but I eventually decided that having him work for almost minimum wage was punishment enough. He was a broken man, and I didn't need to break his body, too. Well, the jail time I made sure he served for the assault probably played a part as well. I did have a reason to contact him about a year ago. A very foolish woman, despite warnings, had to open her heart to this good man. I'll never understand why some people are so gullible. When I heard about his wedding, my heart was filled with mercy for that foolish woman, so I confided in a client. As luck would have it, the cousin of a friend of my client worked in the high-risk personal loan business. When he caught wind of the situation, he was so full of kindness that he sent one of his associates to speak with Capote and gently remind him that good men don't hit women. I heard the lesson didn't need to be repeated. It's good to have friends in low places. Yes, I'll admit that I still have a lot to learn and a long way to go before anyone would call me merciful. But here's the thing about withholding mercy. It keeps you tethered to the person or problem, and it's an insult to your better nature. I couldn't forgive myself for what I did to Judy, but when I extended mercy to her, I was able to extend it to myself as well. That broke the steel shell around my heart and opened it up to the possibility of a happily ever after.